The world had changed, and I was still catching up. At 78, I'd seen rotary phones give way to smartphones, letters replaced by emails. And now, apparently, private struggles splashed across the internet for strangers to gawk at. My name is Eleanor Grayson, and until a few months ago, I thought I'd settled into the quiet rhythm of old age. My small house in Maplewood, with its creaky floors and overgrown garden, was my sanctuary. My son, Daniel, and his wife, Claire, lived with me, a temporary arrangement, so I thought while they got back on their feet, I'd open my home to them, my heart too. But Claire had other plans. She took my vulnerabilities and turned them into her social media spectacle. It started innocently enough. I'd forget where I parked my car at the grocery store or misplace my reading glasses for the third time in a day. Small things. The kind you laugh off when you're pushing 80. But Claire, with her phone always in hand, saw an opportunity. She'd started a blog, Living with Dementia. She called it, painting me as a frail, confused old woman spiraling into mental decay. She posted videos of me fumbling with the TV remote, captioned with patronizing sympathy, "Another tough day for Grandma." She shared stories of my episodes, exaggerated moments when I'd pause mid-sentence, searching for a word. To her thousands of followers, I was a case study, a hashtag, a pity project. To me, she was stealing my dignity, one post at a time. I didn't know about it at first. My neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, was the one who told me. She'd seen Claire's posts on some app called Instagram, where strangers left comments like, "So brave of you to share," or "Prayers for your family." I was mortified. I'd lived through wars, raised a son alone after my husband's death, and kept my independence through every ache and loss. I wasn't perfect, but I wasn't demented. I confronted Claire that evening, my hands trembling not from age but from fury. "Claire, why are you telling the world I'm losing my mind?" I asked, standing in the kitchen where she was scrolling through her phone, her face lit by its glow. She didn't even look up. "It's just content, Eleanor. People relate to it. It's helping others feel less alone." "Content," I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. "You're using my life to play victim online. I'm not sick, and you know it." She sighed, finally meeting my eyes. "You're forgetting things all the time. I'm just being honest. It's not personal." Not personal. It was as personal as it gets. She'd taken my private moments, me humanity, and turned them into her brand. Daniel, bless his heart, tried to mediate, but he was caught between his mother and his wife. "Mom, she's just trying to help," he said weakly, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He knew Claire's help was more about her follower count than my well-being. That night, I lay awake, the weight of betrayal heavy on my chest. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't the caricature Claire had created, and I wasn't going to let her rewrite my story. I'd spent decades building a life of resilience, and I wasn't about to let a 30-something influencer strip that away. The next morning, I drove to the library, where the nice young librarian, Jenny, helped me set up my own social media account. If Claire could play this game, so could I. I wasn't tech-savvy, but I was determined, and I had a plan. Jenny showed me how to navigate the apps, how to post, how to upload a photo. I chose a picture of myself from last year's community garden festival, standing proud with a basket of tomatoes I'd grown myself. "That's the real you," Jenny said, smiling. I nodded, feeling a spark of my old fire. Claire had started this war, but I was going to finish it. I spent the day drafting my first post, my fingers clumsy on the keyboard, but my resolve unshaken. I wrote about my life, my strength, and the truth about my supposed dementia. Then, I added the final touch, a scanned copy of the eviction notice I'd had my lawyer draft for Claire. I hit post and waited. The world was about to see the real Eleanor Grayson. The post went up at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, and by evening, my phone was buzzing like a beehive. I didn't have many followers, mostly neighbors and a few old friends from my book club, but they shared it. Then their friends shared it. By the next morning, my post had reached hundreds of people, some as far away as California. Comments poured in. You go, Eleanor. And this is the kind of strength I want at your age. A few called Claire out directly, though I hadn't named her. They didn't need to know her name to know her type. Claire, of course, was livid. She stormed into the living room, her phone clutched like a weapon. Eleanor, what is this? She demanded, thrusting the screen at me. There it was. My post, with the eviction notice in crisp black and white, stating she had 30 days to vacate my home. It's the truth, I said calmly, sipping my tea. You shared my story without my permission. Now I'm sharing yours. You can't do this, she shouted, her face red. This is our home too. It's my home, I corrected. You were guests. Guests don't exploit their host. Daniel hovered in the doorway, looking like a boy caught in a storm. Mom, can we talk about this? He pleaded. I nodded, but my eyes stayed on Claire. She wasn't just angry. She was unraveling. Her perfect online persona, the caring daughter-in-law, was crumbling, and she knew it. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd taught Daniel to read, where we'd laughed over Sunday dinners. Now it felt like a battlefield. Claire tried to justify herself, saying her posts were educational, that she was raising awareness. But her words rang hollow. She'd never asked how I felt, never considered the shame of having my struggles broadcasted. Daniel tried to defend her, but his voice lacked conviction. He knew she'd crossed a line. I trusted you, I told her, my voice steady but heavy with hurt. I let you into my home, and you turned me into a prop for your followers. That ends now. Claire's eyes welled up, but I wasn't sure if it was guilt or just the sting of being exposed. She left the table without a word, and Daniel followed, whispering apologies. I didn't sleep that night, not because I doubted my decision, but because I knew this was only the beginning. Claire wouldn't go quietly, and I needed to be ready. The next few days were tense. Claire barely spoke to me, her eyes glued to her phone, no doubt strategizing her next move. I kept posting, sharing stories of my life, me years as a nurse, my travels with my late husband, the garden I'd tended for decades. People responded, not with pity, but with admiration. They saw me, not the caricature Claire had created. It felt like reclaiming my voice, one post at a time. But Claire wasn't done. She posted a tearful video, claiming I'd misunderstood her intentions, that I was struggling and needed help. She didn't mention the eviction notice, but her followers filled in the blanks, some accusing me of being cruel. I read their comments, each one a tiny cut, but I refused to back down. I'd spent too long being silent, letting others define me. Not anymore. I called Jenny at the library again, and she helped me craft a response. We recorded a short video, just me, sitting in my garden, the roses blooming behind me. I'm Eleanor Grayson, I said, looking straight at the camera. I'm 78, and I'm not perfect. I forget things sometimes, like we all do. But I'm not a victim, and I'm not your content. I'm a woman who's lived, loved, and fought for her place in this world. And I'm still fighting. The video spread faster than my first post. By the end of the week, it had thousands of views. People sent messages of support, some sharing their own stories of being misrepresented or overlooked. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for everyone who'd been reduced to a hashtag. The fallout was swift and messy. Claire's followers split into camps. Some rallied behind her, calling me ungrateful, while others saw through her facade and unfollowed her. My own little online community grew, a mix of strangers and old friends who cheered me on. But the real battle was at home. Claire and Daniel's marriage, already strained, began to crack under the pressure. I overheard their arguments late at night. Claire's voice sharp with accusation, Daniel's weary with defeat. I didn't want to break their marriage. Daniel was my son, my only child, and I loved him fiercely. But I couldn't ignore what Claire had done. She'd exploited me, and now she was trying to spin the narrative to save face. I wanted her out, but I didn't want to lose my son in the process. It was a tightrope I wasn't sure I could walk. One evening, Daniel came to me alone, his eyes red. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said, sitting across from me in the living room. I didn't know how far she'd taken it. I should have stopped her. I reached for his hand, my heart aching. "You couldn't have known, sweetheart. But you can't keep excusing her." He nodded, staring at the floor. "She's leaving tomorrow. She's going to stay with her sister for a while." I exhaled, relief and sorrow mixing in my chest. The eviction notice had been a bold move. Maybe too bold, but it had forced Claire to face consequences. Still, I worried about Daniel. He was caught in the middle, and I hated that I'd put him there. The next morning, Claire packed her bags in silence. I stayed in my garden, pruning the roses, giving her space. When she left, she didn't say goodbye. Daniel drove her to her sister's, and when he returned, he looked hollow. "She's gone," he said simply, and I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. With Claire out of the house, the air felt lighter, but the wounds remained. I kept posting, not out of spite, but because it had become my way of reclaiming my story. I shared memories of my nursing days, when I'd held the hands of dying patients, or the time I'd backpacked through Europe at 50, fearless and free. People responded with warmth, and I began to see myself through their eyes, not as an old woman, but as a force. But Claire wasn't finished. A week later, she posted a long essay, claiming I'd manipulated the situation to make her look bad. She called me vindictive and said I'd exaggerated my health to gain sympathy. It was a low blow, but I was ready. With Jenny's help, I posted a detailed response, including screenshots of Claire's original posts, where she'd exaggerated my dementia for clout. I let the evidence speak for itself. The response was overwhelming. Local news outlets picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale about privacy and social media. Strangers sent me letters, some handwritten, thanking me for standing up for myself. One woman, a retired teacher, wrote, "You reminded me that age doesn't define us. Thank you for your courage." I didn't feel courageous. I felt tired, bruised, but also alive in a way I hadn't in years. I'd taken back my narrative, but at a cost. Daniel was quieter now, wrestling with his own guilt and the strain on his marriage. I wanted to fix it, but I knew some things had to heal on their own. I spent more time in my garden, finding solace in the earth. The roses were blooming brighter than ever, as if they knew I needed their beauty. I started inviting neighbors over for tea, something I hadn't done in years. Mrs. Thompson brought her famous lemon bars, and we laughed about the absurdity of social media. Life was slowly stitching itself back together, but I knew the story wasn't over yet. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of triumph and unease. My online presence grew, not because I chased it, but because people were drawn to my honesty. I wasn't trying to be an influencer, God forbid, but I'd become a voice for those who felt silenced, especially older folks like me. Emails and messages poured in, some from people my age who'd been dismissed or underestimated, others from younger ones who saw their grandparents in me. It was humbling, but it also reminded me how much Claire's betrayal had hurt. She'd taken something sacred me life and turned it into a performance. Daniel was struggling. He worked long hours at his accounting job, coming home to a quiet house that felt too big without Claire's chatter. I tried to fill the silence with small gestures, cooking his favorite lasagna, leaving the radio on to his jazz station, but I could see the weight on him. One night, over dinner, he finally opened up. "Mom, I don't know if I can fix this," he said, pushing his plate away. "Claire's talking about divorce. She says I didn't stand up for her." I set down my fork, my heart sinking. "Do you think you should have?" He shook his head. "No. She was wrong. But I feel like I failed you both." "You didn't fail me," I said firmly. "You're here, aren't you? We'll get through this." He gave a small nod, but the doubt lingered in his eyes. I wanted to tell him everything would be okay, but I wasn't sure myself. Claire's absence was a relief, but it had left a void. I missed the idea of her the daughter-in-law I'd hoped she'd be, not the one who'd exploited me. Meanwhile, my posts kept gaining traction. A local radio station invited me for an interview, and I agreed, nervous but determined. The host, a kind woman named Rachel, asked about my experience, and I told her everything: Claire's posts, the eviction notice, the fight to reclaim my story. The interview aired the next day, and my phone lit up with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Even my old nursing colleague, Susan, called to say she'd cried listening to me. "You sounded like the Eleanor I knew," she said, "the one who never backed down." Her words stayed with me, a reminder of who I'd always been. But Claire wasn't done fighting. She'd started a new campaign, this time on a different platform, accusing me of elder abuse for kicking her out. It was absurd, but it stung. I could handle her attacks on me, but the idea that she'd twist the narrative to make Daniel look complicit was too much. I called my lawyer, Mr. Reynolds, who advised me to keep documenting everything. "She's digging her own grave," he said. "Let her." I didn't want to escalate things further, but I wasn't going to let her lies spread unchecked. With Jenny's help, I posted a calm, factual rebuttal, including the timeline of events and the original eviction notice. I didn't attack Claire. I let the truth do the talking. The response was immediate. People saw through her accusations, and her credibility took another hit. But the victory felt hollow. I didn't want to destroy Claire. I wanted her to understand the damage she'd done. I started to wonder if I'd gone too far with the eviction notice, if I'd let my anger cloud my judgment. I talked to Mrs. Thompson about it over tea, and she shook her head. "Eleanor, you did what you had to. She crossed a line, and you drew one back. That's not revenge. That's self-respect." Her words helped, but the doubt lingered. I was reclaiming my story, but at what cost? Daniel was hurting, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd pushed too hard. I decided to focus on rebuilding, not just my reputation, but my relationship with my son. We started spending more time together, gardening or watching old movies. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Life settled into a new rhythm, fragile but hopeful. Daniel and I found a quiet routine: breakfast together, evenings in the garden, small moments that stitched us closer. He was still grappling with Claire's absence, but he was trying. I could see it in the way he lingered at the table, asking about my nursing days or the stories behind my old photo albums. It was his way of rebuilding. 2. My online presence, meanwhile, had taken on a life of its own. I wasn't just Eleanor Grayson anymore. I was a symbol of resilience, especially for older women. A local community center asked me to speak at their senior event, and I agreed, though public speaking made my stomach churn. I stood in front of a room of gray-haired faces, some nodding, some teary-eyed, as I shared my story. Age doesn't make you less, I told them. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The applause was warm, but what stayed with me were the conversations afterward. A woman named Margaret, 82, told me her daughter had dismissed her forgetfulness as dementia. 2. I thought I was losing myself, she said, her voice trembling. You reminded me I'm still here. I hugged her, feeling a purpose I hadn't known I needed. But Claire's shadow lingered. She'd gone quiet online, but I heard through Daniel that she was telling friends I'd ruined her life. I didn't want to care, but I did. I'd acted out of necessity, but the eviction notice had been a bold move, one that still sat heavy on my heart. I wondered if there was a way to end this without more pain. One afternoon, while pruning my roses, I got a call from Rachel, the radio host. She'd heard from a producer at a national talk show who wanted to feature me. It's a chance to share your story with a bigger audience, she said. I hesitated. The idea of national TV was daunting, but it was also an opportunity to set the record straight. Not just for me, but for others like Margaret. I agreed, and a week later, I was in a studio, lights glaring, cameras rolling. The host, a warm woman named Lisa, asked about Claire's posts, the eviction notice, and how I'd fought back. I spoke from the heart, telling her about the betrayal, the shame, and the strength I'd found in reclaiming my narrative. I'm not perfect, I said, but I'm not a victim, and I won't let anyone define me. The segment aired the following week, and the response was overwhelming. My social media account exploded with messages, some from as far away as Australia. People shared their own stories of being underestimated or exploited, and I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about dignity, about refusing to be erased. Daniel watched the show with me, his arm around my shoulders. I'm proud of you, Mom, he said, and for the first time in months, I saw a spark of the boy I'd raised. We were healing, slowly, but it was enough for now. Claire, however, saw the show as a fresh attack. She posted a cryptic message online, hinting at forgiveness but never acknowledging her role. I didn't respond. I was done fighting her battles. Instead, I focused on the people who mattered. Daniel, my neighbors, the strangers who'd become my community. I started a blog, not for fame, but to keep sharing. I wrote about resilience, about the beauty of aging, about the small victories that make life worth living. Each post felt like a brick in the wall I was rebuilding around my heart. I wasn't just surviving Claire's betrayal. I was thriving in spite of it. The talk show appearance changed things. My story wasn't just local news anymore. It was a conversation. I got emails from advocacy groups, asking me to speak at conferences or write guest articles. I was hesitant at first. Public speaking wasn't my forte, but Daniel encouraged me. You've got something to say, Mom, he told me one evening as we sat on the porch. People need to hear it. So I said yes. I spoke at a senior rights conference in Chicago, sharing a stage with activists half my age. I told them about Claire, about the humiliation of being turned into a social media prop, and about the power of taking back your story. The audience stood at the end, clapping so loudly it shook me. Afterward, a young woman approached, her eyes bright with tears. My grandma's in a nursing home, she said. They treat her like she's invisible. You've given me the courage to fight for her. Her words hit me hard. I'd started this to defend myself. But now I was part of something bigger. I wasn't just Eleanor Grayson. I was a voice for those who'd been silenced. It was a responsibility I didn't take lightly. Back home, Daniel was finding his footing. He'd started therapy, something I never thought he'd do, and it was helping him process Claire's betrayal and his own role in it. We talked more openly now, about his marriage, his fears, and the future. I don't know if we'll reconcile, he admitted one night. But I know I want to be here for you. That's enough, I told him, and I meant it. We were rebuilding, brick by brick. Claire, meanwhile, had gone silent online. Her blog was dormant, her posts sparse. I heard through a mutual friend that she'd moved to a new city, trying to start over. Part of me hoped she'd learned something, but I wasn't holding my breath. Some people cling to their version of the truth, no matter how flimsy. My own blog was growing, not because I chased followers, but because I was honest. I wrote about the hard days when my knees ached or I forgot a friend's name and the good ones. Like when Daniel and I planted a new rosebush together. People responded to the truth, not the polished version Claire had tried to sell. I started hosting weekly tea gatherings at my house, inviting neighbors and even some of my online followers who lived nearby. The house, once heavy with tension, was filled with laughter again. One afternoon, I got a letter from Claire. No return address, just her handwriting, shaky and uneven. She didn't apologize outright, but she wrote about regrets and missteps. She said she'd taken down her blog and was trying to do better. I read it twice, searching for sincerity, but I wasn't sure I found it. I showed it to Daniel, who sighed and shook his head. She wants to come back, he said quietly, but I don't know if I can trust her. I didn't push him. It was his decision, his heart. I tucked the letter away, not ready to forgive, but not ready to hate either. Life was too short for that. My garden became my sanctuary again, a place where I could think. The roses were thriving, their petals a reminder of resilience. I'd faced Claire's betrayal, the world's judgment, and my own doubts, and I was still here. I wasn't just surviving. I was living, fully and fiercely. As winter approached, I started planning a new project, a book. Maybe. About aging with dignity. I didn't know if I'd finish it, but the idea excited me. I was 78, and I was still growing, still learning, still fighting. And that, I realized, was the real victory. Winter came to Maplewood, blanketing my garden in frost, but not my spirit. The house felt alive again, with Daniel's jazz records playing softly and the smell of my baking filling the air. My blog had become a small beacon for others, and I spent evenings responding to messages, each one a reminder that my story mattered. But the shadow of Claire's letter lingered, a loose thread I couldn't quite tie off. Daniel was healing, slowly. He'd thrown himself into work, but he was home more often, helping with chores or just sitting with me in the quiet. One night, as we watched an old Hitchcock film, he brought up Claire again. She called, he said, his voice low. She wants to meet, to talk. I nodded, keeping my eyes on the screen. What do you want? I don't know, he admitted. Part of me wants to try, but part of me can't forget what she did to you. I turned to him, seeing the boy I'd raised and the man he'd become. Whatever you choose. I'm here, I said. But don't let her hurt you again. He squeezed my hand, and we went back to the movie, but I knew he was wrestling with it. I wanted to protect him, but some battles he had to fight alone. My speaking engagements grew, and I found myself traveling more than I had in years. I spoke at a community center in Boston, then a library in Philadelphia. Each time, I shared my story, but I also listened. People told me about their own struggles being dismissed by family, overlooked by society, or exploited in ways that echoed my own experience. It was humbling, but it also fueled me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for all of us. Back home, my tea gatherings had become a weekly tradition. Mrs. Thompson brought her lemon bars. Jenny from the library shared her poetry. And even Margaret, the woman from the senior event, started coming. We laughed, cried, and swapped stories, building a community I hadn't realized I needed. One afternoon, Margaret pulled me aside. "You've changed things, Eleanor," she said. "Not just for you, but for all of us who feel invisible." Her words stayed with me, a reminder that this wasn't about revenge or winning. It was about dignity, about claiming space in a world that often pushed us aside. I started working on my book in earnest, scribbling notes about resilience, aging, and the power of truth. It was slow going. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be, but it felt right. Claire's name came up less and less, but her absence was still a wound. Daniel met with her once, at a coffee shop in town. He came home quiet, his eyes heavy. "She apologized," he said, but it felt rehearsed. I didn't press him for details. I trusted him to find his way. Instead, I focused on the Present Me garden, my writing, my community. The roses were dormant now, but I knew they'd bloom again in spring. So would I? One evening, as I was drafting a blog post, I got an email from a publisher. They'd seen my story on the talk show and wanted to discuss a book deal. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. At 78, I was being offered a chance to share my story with the world, not as a victim, but as a survivor. I called Daniel, who whooped so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Mom, you're a rock star," he said, and for the first time in months, he laughed. I laughed too, feeling lighter than I had in years. Claire had tried to define me, but she'd only made me stronger. I was Eleanor Grayson, and I was just getting started. Spring arrived, and with it, new beginnings. My garden burst into color. The roses a testament to resilience, their petals bright against the morning dew. Daniel was finding his way, spending more time with friends and less time lost in thought. He decided not to reconcile with Claire, a choice that brought him peace, even if it hurt. "I need to figure out who I am without her," he told me one morning over coffee, and I nodded, proud of his courage. My book deal was finalized, and I spent my days writing, pouring my heart into pages that told not just my story, but the stories of others I'd met along the way. The publisher loved my voice, raw, honest, unapologetic, and I found joy in the process, even when it was hard. Writing forced me to confront the pain of Claire's betrayal, but it also reminded me of my strength. I wasn't just an old woman. I was a force, a survivor, a voice. The tea gatherings grew, spilling out into the garden on warm days. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers who'd read my blog came, bringing stories and laughter. Mrs. Thompson declared it Eleanor's Salon, and the name stuck. It was more than a gathering. It was a community, a reminder that none of us were alone. One afternoon, I got a package in the mail. It was from Claire, a small box with a note. "I'm sorry," it read, in her familiar handwriting. "I was wrong. I hope you can forgive me someday." Inside was a photo of the three of us, me, Daniel, and Claire, from a Christmas years ago, when things were still good. I stared at it, my heart heavy but not angry. I didn't know if I could forgive her. Not yet. But I kept the photo, tucking it into a drawer. I showed it to Daniel, who sighed. She's trying, he said. But it's not enough. It's a start, I replied, and we left it at that. My book, Reclaiming My Story, was published the following year. It wasn't a bestseller, but it didn't need to be. It reached the people who needed ethos who'd felt erased, dismissed, or betrayed. I got letters from readers, some young, some old, all saying the same thing. You made me feel seen. That was enough. At 79, I was busier than ever speaking, writing, gardening, living. Daniel moved into his own place nearby, but he visited often, our bond stronger than ever. The house was mine again, filled with light and laughter, not tension. My roses bloomed brighter each year, a reminder that beauty could grow from hardship. Claire never contacted me again, but I heard she'd started a new blog, this time about her own journey, not someone else's. I hoped she'd learned, but it wasn't my battle anymore. I'd fought for my dignity, my story, my life, and I'd won. As I sat in my garden one evening, the sun setting behind the roses, I thought about the journey. Claire's betrayal had hurt, but it had also woken me up. I'd found my voice, my strength, my purpose. I was Eleanor Grayson, and I was still here, still blooming, still fighting. And that was the greatest story of all.